Welcome to Coffee with Kupke, a production of St. Paul Inside the Walls. Here on Coffee with Kupke, we grab a cup of coffee, at least we're claiming this is coffee. We sit with Monsignor Kupke, Raymond Kupke, the pastor of St. Anthony's in Hawthorne, professor at Immaculate Conception Seminary, diocesan archivist. We sit with Monsignor Kupke to delve into the history of Catholicism in the Diocese of Paterson. My name is Father Paul Manning. I am the vicar for Evangelization for the Diocese of Paterson. And here I am with Monsignor Kupke. So grab your cup of coffee and let's jump right in. I'm going to take a sip. Monsignor Kupke, as we take leave of Bishop McLaughlin, yes. I'm struck by the gigantic figures that appear in the history of the diocese. It seems that when the need arises, we end up with
the right person.
And he definitely was that. Yeah.
He was formidable. Both physically big, but also in what he was able to accomplish in 9.5 years.
Yeah, and
in what he was able to, I don't want to say pull out, but bring out of his clergy.
Yes, yeah. So the monumental figure ends up being commemorated with a monument at the front of the cathedral.
Yeah. Most people don't know this detail, but both the monuments in front of the cathedral are by the same sculptor, Gaetano Federici.
Yeah.
And the one of Dean McNulty on the right was his first major work, and Bishop McLaughlin's on the other side was his last major work.
Oh, interesting. Wow. So we're moving into chapter 8 now, which is a chapter that spans the years 1947 to 1963. You entitle it "The Winds of Change." Oh no, between the war and the council, between the war and the council. And I was thinking, this is our chapter. This is because
I was born at the beginning of this chapter.
Right,
yes.
and I'm born in 1958, so we appear on the scene.
That's right.
In chapter 8, although neither of us are mentioned, I hate to say. As I was reading through this chapter, I was thinking of a current book that is influential right now, put out by the University of Mary, Monsignor Shea, called From Christendom to Apostolic Mission. And the premise of the book is that we're living in an apostolic era rather than in the era of Christendom. And in some ways, this chapter marks the close of Christendom in a way in the church in America and in the Diocese of Paterson. Do you think that's overstating the case?
No, I think once the war ended, I think the American church was poised for an apostolic moment. I think it was kind of thrust on them by circumstances of demographics and change in the country, but still they responded to it.
Yeah, so that response is going to come, I think, largely 1963 and later. But I guess what I'm saying is we're still in an era in this chapter where the tried and true formulas and structures still hold. You're just starting to get a sense that things are going to change, but we're still in an era in which
things as they were.
Yeah. And even though there's tremendous growth in the diocese, it's still growth according to the
plan,
the normal patterns. Yeah. So I'm jumping ahead, maybe anticipating season part 2 of Coffee with Kupke, but your book talks now in the last chapters about the era 1947 to 1963 between the war and the council, 1963 to 1977, you call that chapter The Winds of Change, coming out of Vatican II. And then your last chapter is 1977 to 1987, which was the anniversary of the diocese.
Right. And the publication of the books.
Yeah. I'm just curious, from 1987 to now, if you were writing the next volume, where would you break the chapters? What are the epics, the eras since 1987 that you see we've gone through?
Since 1987.
Yeah. I figured you must have done some thinking about this, right?
Yeah, I probably would bring a chapter to the end of Redeemer's episcopate.
Which would be, what year was that now again?
2004.
Okay. And that would
And that would kind of correspond with the end of John Paul II.
That's what I was going to say, yeah. And then the next era?
Next era would be now. You know, the last 14 years of Saratelli and 4 years of Sweeney.
Yeah, okay.
Although I think, well, it'd be interesting to see. I think the last era would be characterized as an era of instability. You know, certainly it's an era that we've seen a lot of the institutional church that was built up in these previous eras beginning to close or change or, you know, leave Catholic auspices.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, you have this place, St. Paul Inside the Walls, and other initiatives that are pulling us in a new direction.
Yeah,
so,
the start of something new.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, the biggest one, I suppose, although nobody wants to say it out loud, is the collapse of the Catholic school system.
yeah.
You know, to the point where it will become a rarity, not the norm in parish life.
Right, right. And I also think the abuse scandal really has marked
yes.
our history in a huge way.
A very sharp way.
Yeah. Well, to go back to 1947 to 1963, in this era, the growth in the Catholic population in New Jersey is phenomenal. I think you said in this period almost 2 million Catholics are added to the population in our diocese. Yeah.
Yeah, you have, you know, at the end of the war, you have the return of all of these young men who want to get on with their lives, having changed the world, you know. I often get fixated by them because they were so young when they came back.
Yes.
Today, they would be like almost high school kids.
Yeah.
And some of them were when they were drafted. So they come back with a combination of energy and experience that most generations don't ever get. And they just hit the bricks there. And you know, the GI Bill, when I teach this section in the seminary course, you know, I say that Harry Truman is the most important person in the history of the Catholic Church in the United States because the GI Bill, you know, transformed American Catholicism. And certainly in our diocese, you can see the opening of new parishes. You know, you can follow them right up every highway in the diocese.
Yeah. So the GI Bill allowed men to go back to school.
Right. It allowed returning veterans from the war to go back to school for free.
Okay.
And
so that changed American Catholicism from what?
From a ghetto, inner city to, you know, these guys got a college education, so they got better jobs, they made more money, and never mind the fact that there were a lot of them.
Yes.
And they just boomed out of these. I mean, those inner city Catholic neighborhoods just could not contain all these people as they began getting married. And, like you and I both have experience of St. Philip's in Clifton, which is a post-war parish to start with.
Right.
But I was there when that wave hit weddings, like we were doing 100 weddings a year because all of these babies that were born in that baby boom were starting to get married. And, it was just a wave. It was like a tsunami of weddings in a couple of years.
St. Peter's, my first assignment, we did 125 weddings a year. I remember because of Monsignor Flanagan, Father Dave Coppola, and I would try and pawn them off on the other guys. Anyway, I just want to pick up on something you mentioned. At one point in this chapter, you trace the development of parishes along the three major highways of the diocese: Route 23, which kind of diagonally dissects the diocese.
Route 46.
Route 46 and Route 10.
Route 10.
Yeah. And you name the parishes that develop along those routes.
Yeah, like in the decade of the 50s, along Route 10, you start with Florham Park, and then East Hanover, and then Succasunna. You can see, right up the highway.
Yeah, the population moving. I was surprised to find out that Route 80, which was begun in the early 1950s, was built in our state from west to east, it looks like. And I was trying to remember why we took Route 46 to Long Island, but it's because the last part of Route 80 wasn't really finished until the early 70s, I think.
It was very difficult because northern New Jersey was fairly developed.
To try and get a highway in there.
To try and condemn or buy or, get a right-of-way to build a highway was...
Somehow they did it.
It was one of the last pieces to be built on 287 was through Morristown, and they fought it for years. Whether it was going to go around Washington's headquarters, underneath Washington's headquarters.
Wow. Yeah.
So
and it just skirted Washington's headquarters.
Putting an interstate highway through North Jersey is not a.
Yeah, that's true. Well,
I got my only detention in high school.
Oh, but this is not even in the footnotes.
No, thanks to Route 80. I was a freshman at Morris Catholic, and we were on the second floor of the building. And from those windows, you could see them building Route 80 up the hill, towards Rockaway. And, I had read that when this was done, you could go from New York to San Francisco without a single traffic light, so... I was somewhere in Cheyenne, Wyoming, when the nun called on me, and I couldn't get back fast enough.
And you got a detention.
I was already on that road, and I was gone.
That's. Do you remember the name of the sister?
Helen Joseph.
Okay, of happy memory, I'm sure.
Happy memory.
Yeah. Another interesting detail that thought crossed my mind, and then I found it in your book. You say in 1960, for the very first time, the human population in Sussex County outnumbered the bovine population. Yes. People outnumbered cows.
Yes. Yeah.
That's something. So as Bishop McLaughlin leaves the scene, we receive a new bishop, Bishop Boland.
Thomas Boland.
From Newark, correct?
Yes. Both of the bishops of this period, Boland and James McNulty,
who will come soon,
were very popular appointments, and most of the clergy felt they knew them. Boland had been spiritual director of the seminary, professor at the seminary, rector of the seminary, and a very, very popular spiritual director and confessor.
Okay.
So his appointment to replace McLaughlin was very well received. The clergy were very content, very happy with his appointment. And his time with us was relatively brief. It would only be a little bit over 5 years.
And then he would be...
Then he would be named Archbishop of Newark.
Yeah. And what number Archbishop of Newark was he?
Second.
Oh, okay.
The second Bishop of Paterson, second Archbishop of Newark.
Okay.
I interviewed him. I think
I
I
know, you say that in the footnotes,
asking him, because he was Chancellor of the Newark Diocese when our diocese was founded. And I asked him why did they establish the Paterson Diocese? And he was very direct and very matter of fact. He said, we just felt that there was a whole bunch of growth about to take place in the western part of the diocese, and
we weren't taking
our
care of
energies
it.
were all focused on the cities.
Yeah. He was born in 1896, so I was thinking here's probably the last ordinary in our history born in the 19th century. Now we're fully into the 20th century.
Yeah.
So
if you know West Orange at all, Our Lady of Lourdes Parish in West Orange, his family was one of the founding families there.
Okay. And he was not from a well-to-do family, right?
No. No.
And he wasn't expecting to go to the seminary at first?
Not at first, no. He kind of had a business idea in mind, but then changed his mind.
But you say he studied Latin at night in order to be ready,
yeah.
And then went to Xavier High School.
In Manhattan, yeah.
Right. Father Dan Murphy's
Dan Murphy would be very
proud graduate of that. Right. He worked for the Edison Company.
Yeah. Well, he lived right around the corner from the Edison Company. You know, the Edison factory was in West Orange, right around the corner from where he grew up.
Yeah, and so were they making light bulbs? Is that what the Edison Company did?
Yeah.
Because I looked it up. Edison discovered, invented the light bulb in 1879. So about, not that much before he was born. And he ended up going to the North American College, Boland.
He did, yeah.
Was that normal for bishop material? It seems like a lot of the bishops were educated at the North American College.
It was not unusual, probably more so then than today. And Newark had a history of connection. The second Bishop of Newark, Michael Corrigan, was in the very first ordination.
Oh, I remember
class
that.
of NAC,
Yeah,
and I was the first NAC alumnus to become a bishop.
Yeah.
So, it was not unusual for Newark to send one or two guys over there, and they had somebody from the diocese as rector there at one point. So, they had a lot of connections.
Well, Boland was a teacher and educator, worked in formation, and you said at one point he must have been really talented because you say at one point he held 19 positions. You want to get a job to get done, give it to a busy guy. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's why you have so many.
And he sent Bishop Rodimer to Catholic University.
Yes, he ordained Bishop Rodimer, a priest, and was present when he was ordained a bishop, years later.
Yeah.
But he's the one that, decided to send Rodimer for graduate studies at Catholic U.
Which ended up Rodimer becoming vice chancellor and part of the chancery staff and ultimately.
Right. Basically, I think of it all the time because it happened in my sacristy in Hawthorne.
What happened?
His appointment to go to study.
Bishop Rodimer's appointment?
Yeah. The custom then was to take one of the newly ordained and send them to Branchville for the summer.
Okay.
To be chaplain at the Knights of Columbus camp at Culver's Lake. So Rodimer got that appointment. But by the end of the summer, he didn't know what was next. The camp had closed. The summer was over.
Oh, and he was newly ordained?
He was newly ordained. He still had no permanent assignment.
Oh, I got it.
And especially under Monsignor Lewis, things were kind of lackadaisical. Lewis, it's not that they didn't think about it, but they didn't do it right away. So this dragged on. So finally, the pastor of Hawthorne died on September 4th.
Who was that?
William Thompson.
Okay.
And Rodimer went to the funeral as a priest of the diocese.
That's good. It's nice when priests go to priest funerals.
Right. And at the end of the funeral, Monsignor Lewis came out of the sacristy and said to Rodimer, very young Rodimer. Rodimer was only like 24 at this point.
Yeah.
Bishop would like to see you. So he went into the sacristy, and the two of them told him that his permanent assignment would be to go to Catholic U and get the degree in canon law. And, with something that somewhat became typical of the Lewis years, they said, by the way, you have to show up next week.
Oh, boy. Well, that custom of calling someone aside at a priest funeral.
It's been going on for a long time.
And giving him an assignment that he's not expecting. Yeah, that happens more often than you would think. The last story I wanted to mention about Bishop Boland was you talk in this section about how happy his priests were with him and how attentive and pastoral he could be. And you mentioned the story of Monsignor Christian Haig. I don't know if he was Monsignor then.
St. Monica's in Sussex.
Losing weekend help or something.
Yeah.
And
this was a period when the notion of a priest only being permitted to say 2 masses on Sunday was not only in force, it still is, but it was
strictly observed.
Strictly observed.
Yeah.
So,
and that was to prevent guys from taking stipends for multiple masses, right?
So Christian Haig, St. Monica's had 1 or 2 mass stations in the summer. They had more masses in the summer than they did the rest of the year. And he knew that I think it was the last Sunday of August, actually.
He needed
knew
help.
That he
couldn't say more than 2 masses, yeah.
Right. Not only that, but they were in 2 or 3 different places, so he couldn't get. So he called up the chancery office and said, I'm stuck here. Can you help me? And Boland said, don't worry, we'll take care of it. We'll send somebody up. And so Haig, I don't think, realized it until after it was over that the help that had come up was the bishop himself.
Yeah, Father Boland.
Boland said mass at Lake Walkill.
Yeah. Well, the next time we speak, we're going to say farewell to Bishop Boland, and
we hardly got to know him.
Yeah, welcome the new bishop, Bishop McNulty. Let's leave it there. I want all of you who are listening or watching to make sure that you keep an eye out or an ear out for the next episode of Coffee with Kupke. In order to stay on top of new releases, make sure you follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. And if you are on YouTube, please do drop a like and hit the bell for notifications. While you're at it, make sure to check out the other shows produced by the diocese. Those shows are Beyond the Beacon, hosted by Bishop Kevin Sweeney and Jay Agnish, our Director of Communications, and the Paul Street Journal, hosted by Brian Hansberger and Freddie Garcia. I want to give a special thanks to Joe Ginexi, our sound and visual engineer, Caitlin Ferrari, who's involved in pre- and post-production, and Freddie Garcia, who's helping out with this podcast in addition to doing his own. With all that said, I just want to thank you for joining us in Coffee with Kupke. Keep making Catholic history in the Diocese of Paterson.